Hey, Earthlings, welcome along to another Vegan Time Tunnel Regenerated. So we're putting together an archive for the movement, significant people, significant events, etc., until we build up a really interesting archive about the history of our movement. It's very important to know the history of the movement that you've joined. So I encourage people, obviously, to familiarize yourself. Now we've got a real heavyweight today, so let's get on with it. Yeah, so our subject today is Kathleen Jannaway, a very important person in the history of the vegan social movement. She did extremely important jobs, including being the Vegan Society's General Secretary over many years throughout the 70s and up until 1984. In fact, for many years, her own house was regarded as vegan HQ. She was a big proponent of veganics, and she was opposed to junk foods. Although what classifies as junk food back then is rather an interesting question and uncertain, really. I think what is certain is that she would be horrified by the modern day food system and the idea that there are such things as junk food vegans. That would appall her, I'm sure. In 1985, she launched Movement for Compassionate Living, which is still online, and includes a full section on the life and campaigning of Kathleen Jannaway. So that's a good place to go if you're looking for further resources. She was born in 1915 and died in 2003 at the age of 87. She had very working class origins, and the values of her parents and also her grandparents were to shape her radical vision of a just and radical vegan future. She was born into a very poor family, and she recalled as a child having to sometimes go to bed early on some days because the gas supply in the house would run out. So things were pretty bad in that sense. Kathleen Jannaway lost both parents by the age of 3 and was brought up by her grandparents. Before his death, her father was a speaker for the Socialist Party of Britain, and that later became the British Labour Party. He gave many talks on peace and also on the dignity of the working class. Her grandfather held unorthodox views and was said to be opposed to Kathleen joining the Girl Guides. Their values, he thought, was a reflection of the status quo, and he was opposed to that. As a bright child, Kathleen won an educational scholarship to grammar school, where she learnt the value of critical thinking and to question everything. However, she gave up the opportunity to go to university and instead took up a job as a teacher in order to financially support her family. So this was a common experience for working class people in the day, especially for girls or young women who were expected to sacrifice their educational attainment for the sake of the family, which Kathleen did. She married her lifelong partner, Jack Jannaway, just before the so-called Second World War. And just like Donald Watson, they both registered as conscientious objectors. During the war, they both turned vegetarian when Kathleen saw her slaughterhouse truck arrive to take lambs away to be killed. Not yet vegan, she helped organize a protest meeting for the organization that would become Oxfam, and they demanded that dried cow milk be sent to children of allies in mainland Europe. It was the Jannaway's keen ability to see connections between justice issues that led them both to veganism. Kathleen taught children with learning difficulties, and she was a peace and freedom from hunger campaigner, and served for many years on the executive committee of the Gandhi Foundation. She said that she came to animal issues via her concerns for peace and world hunger. She said, quote, "My involvement in the animal movement developed out of these, particularly when I began to make connections between the different issues." Her views on the entanglements of oppression and liberation can be seen in this clip that I'm going to show you from a 1992 talk she gave at a vegan festival.
I think generally it's hope. And if we can solve this problem of animal exploitation and spread veganism, we should also solve the problems of war and poverty and all the other things that has caused immense suffering to people and animals through the ages. Veganism is as important as that.
Back in 1964, the Observer newspaper in London published a remarkable two-page review of Ruth Harrison's book called Animal Machines, the New Factory Farming Industry. Harrison's text deeply shocked an entire nation, the Jannaways included. Harrison revealed, for example, that calves were separated from their mothers to be sent to veal units, where they were tethered and not allowed access to solid food. She said, in fact, that animal machines knocked her for six. So this is a little clip from an early version, if you like, of the Time Tunnel when I was preparing things for a VegFest UK series.
And this is what led her to veganism, she saw a review of this famous book here, Animal Machines. That kind of book really shocked the nation, as I put in the blog entry, but it also shocked the Jannaways very much, and that led her to realise the plight, as it were, of dairy animals, and she said this: "It was at this point that I realised that these calves were a surplus of the dairy industry, and that the milk which nature intended for them was being fed to us." Even for vegans in the 21st century, this is still an issue, getting people to understand the issue of lactation, being a mammal, calf food, cow's milk, and all of that kind of thing. For Jannaway then, it was quite a shock to learn that, and it was the fact that she was able to put these issues together with her interests in peace and world hunger, for example, that led to her having a very well developed kind of vegan vision for the future.
Jannaway decided that she would attempt to live without consuming calf food. Back in '64, Kathleen Jannaway, like most people, had never heard of the philosophy of veganism and knew nothing of the existence of the vegan social movement, which was only 20 years old at the time. As an early vegan pioneer, she had the same fears of people like Donald Watson and Eva Batt, and they held that about when they first went vegan. That is, whether or not it's possible to survive without any animal products. We have to remember the tale that I've told time and time again, which is that when these people decided to go fully plant-based, people, their friends, their vegetarian friends, and even their doctors told them that they were going to die. Victoria Moran, author of Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, reports on a research trip she undertook in 1981 to study vegans in both Britain and in Ireland. Moran met Kathleen Jannaway, who told her that the very earliest vegans didn't know if our bones would disintegrate or if we'd perish in a fortnight. However, animal advocate and author Mark Gold suggests that some of the initial health fears about veganism had been dispelled by the time that Jannaway herself became the Vegan Society's General Secretary in the 1970s. In the early 70s, virtually all of the Vegan Society literature was written and typed and produced by Kathleen and Jack Jannaway. In a leaflet from 1972, it is clear that Kathleen understood the power of culture and of advertising, saying that most people find difficulty in adjusting to ideas that do not fit in with the habits and thought patterns of generations, especially when, as with feeding habits in the West, both producers and consumers are subject to the high-pressure advertising of the meat, dairy, and chemical industries. Jannaway was issuing warnings about the environmental crisis, often called global warming in those days, from at least the early 1970s. She pointed out that humanity was engaged in an all-out assault on the living systems of the planet, showing that she shared a similar radical vision to the vegan movement pioneers of the 1940s and 1950s. She declared that the age of the new man is dawning, with the vegan being the prototype of the new man of the new age. I noted earlier that the Jannaway's house became vegan headquarters in the 1970s, ironically situated in an English town which was called Leatherhead. The Movement for Compassionate Living report that their house and garden became a venue, attended by many over the years, for meetings and garden parties to raise funds for many concerns that they were involved in. Many will remember Kathleen and Jack's garden as a place where they came together each year and for vegans up and down the country. These meetings were especially important for people who were isolated, those who knew no other vegans living close to them, and for those who had vegan children. Mark Gold says that Kathleen Jannaway was all about linking the compassionate desire to avoid animal products with the rational use of world food resources. Gold states that her own half-acre of garden was soon turned into a horticultural experiment where she and Jack successfully developed green manure techniques, which is manure from plant sources only, of course, food-bearing trees, vegetables, and fruit beds. The Vegan Society was famously featured in a BBC community-based TV program called Open Door in 1976. Reviewing the program, long-term vegan Kim Stallwood notes that watching the program today shows that many of the arguments made for veganism in the 1970s remain the same today. For example, that most people could be fed directly through plants, that we don't need to put them through our fellow animals, and therefore veganism could alleviate world hunger, or that consuming dairy products involve more animal exploitation than eating animal flesh. Kathleen was featured at some length in this BBC program. She was proudly showing off her green manure techniques. The show is admittedly looking very dated nowadays. It's on YouTube. Indeed, vegan comedian Simon Amstell used sections of the film for comic effect in his 2017 mockumentary, which was called Carnage. The production values are poor, but we have to remember that the idea for the BBC was to hand their facilities over to NGOs or social movement organizations in order for them to showcase their work. So it was absolutely incredibly important at the time for the Vegan Society, and their membership rose greatly because of this program. When at the Vegan Society, Jannaway encouraged the publication of a grassroots magazine, which was called Vegan Views. This regularly featured in radical bookstores of the day, as I remember well. These early ones you see on the left of your screen there, they were just pencil drawings, and then you ended up having photography used in some of the later ones. Kathleen seems to have ended her involvement with the Vegan Society in 1984. More precisely, perhaps, there is some evidence that she may have been thrown out of the organization. She wasn't able to attend the 1984 AGM because she was caring for her husband, Jack, who was seriously ill at the time, and she was voted off at the AGM from the Society's ruling council. Harry Mather, in his obituary to Kathleen entitled A Life Well Lived, said that she felt the Vegan Society had stabbed her in the back. This was the time of professionalism within the vegan movement, and there were accusations being thrown about on both sides of this debate, e.g. that the Vegan Society was being under attack by extremists, or that the society was being run in an unprofessional way, a slapdash manner. Sociologists point out that with professionalism comes moderation. Now, we can't be certain that moderation, or de-radicalization, if you like, was a factor for Kathleen leaving the Vegan Society. But we do know that the Society was in the process of developing the fairly tame official definition of veganism that is still in use today. We also know by reading the back issues of the Vegan Society journal, that the Vegan Society rapidly abandoned the radical vision of its pioneers, such as Leslie Cross and Donald Watson in particular. And there's only an odd reflection of their values from the 1980s onwards. In the 1980s, for example, the potted histories of the vegan social movement that appeared in The Vegan made no mention at all of Leslie Cross. It is certainly the case there has been no voices within the vegan social movement to match that of Leslie Cross or Donald Watson or Kathleen Jannaway ever since. Mark Gold entitled his chapter on Jannaway, Visionary or Crank, claiming that some dismissed Kathleen due to her utopian views for the future. They were indeed utopian, and her revolutionary ideas would be fully developed when she stopped working for the Vegan Society and she formed the movement for compassionate living. For example, she looked forward with optimism towards a tree-based culture in which animal agriculture would be replaced by forests, providing food and providing building materials. A mitigating factor, she said, against climate change, and a big part of prevention of soil erosion, which was a central concern of hers. She wanted to see a global network of tree-based autonomous vegan villages, replacing industrialized cities. So Jannaway's tree-based vision of the future is truly radical. It would prevent monocropping, she said. It would end unemployment and would refertilize areas of desert. There was even talk in some parts of Movement for Compassionate Living about the abolition of money as part of the vegan future. At one point, Movement for Compassionate Living received a £80,000 donation, which was a big deal in those days, and they gave 70,000 of that to the Vegan Organic Network in order to develop an educational centre. I don't really have much details about whether that was developed and still ongoing or anything like that. She was a great supporter of science, but argued that science must be guided by compassion. The enormous power that humans have needs compassionate direction, she argued. And reflecting views of the early vegan movement pioneers, she believed that humanity's moral development had fallen behind. Veganism, on the other hand, manifests a proper, balanced human being, she believed. In 1986, Jannaway wrote that freedom from dependence on the slaughterhouse nurtures faith in the possibility of creating a compassionate age. In terms of active campaigning and advocacy, she said that anger had its place, but it should be anger that is directed towards the act rather than the actor. She said that education is the key to spread veganism, and this means that we must take some time to educate ourselves as well. She said that we must be aware that the present materialistic, competitive, violent civilization, which has spread rapidly through the world, is not sustainable. In terms of her position on interconnections, Jannaway recognized that veganism must be central to our thinking, and again echoing the views of the pioneers of the movement from the 40s and 50s, she underscores their point that veganism represents the liberation of human beings and our fellow animals. Jannaway states with great hope that an era of truly abundant living will dawn for humanity. Humans at peace with themselves, with each other, and with all living creatures. This will reach heights of creativity, she said, as yet unimagined. After Kathleen's death in 2003, David Graham of Growing Green International, a twice-yearly magazine published by the Vegan Organic Network, wrote this. About 20 years ago, Jane and I, these are the co-founders of the Vegan Organic Network, went to a meeting in an obscure hall in a back street in Glossop, Derbyshire. I can't remember the title of the talk, but I remember the speaker, Kathleen Jannaway. There was nothing grey about her. He's kind of referring to Glossop itself. Although she was friendly and warm, there was a fire and challenge in her manner and her delivery. Kathleen drew together all the threads that informed her veganism: war and peace, injustice, social exclusion, cruelty, rights violations, animal rights, hunger, and consumerism. Her talk was informed, objective, and at the same time passionate and moving, he said. And so we're going to finish with indeed a example of all of that, and again from the Vegan Festival of 1992. Thanks very much for tuning in to the Vegan Time Tunnel Regenerated, and I'll see you again sometime soon.
I say without hesitation that I think accelerating a trend to veganism is the most important thing we can do today to save all highly developed forms of life on this planet. We live at momentous times, at what could be a terrific turning point in evolution. Nothing, to my mind, can exaggerate the importance of veganism. It seems clear to me that the age of predatory man and woman is coming to an end. He is destroying not only the animals, but the whole planet and himself too. He cannot go on. And the alternative is the vegan way. Compassion to all life, all the animals, and also to the planet, the plants, and the humans. That's the only alternative. And it is our awesome responsibility to bear the task of introducing that alternative to the whole world. And that's why it's so important to have this international gathering.